The lasting effect on this is the enhancement of Africa's industry, trade, technological advancements, and more ideas involving culture. In this case, the Europeans are forcibly attempting to globalize other nations through the use of force and violence. Though this is not a positive effect for those who are victimized, the constant change and development among less civilized nations was yet occurring. This idea of power and control circulated the globe, leveling each land, leaving the people with no choice but to advance and progress into the future. One such development was the growth of nationalism, or deep devotion to one nation. Nationalism can serve as a unifying force within a country. However, it can also cause intense competition among nations when seeking to overpower the other. By the 20th century, a fierce rivalry developed among Europe's great powers, which included Germany, Austria-Hungary, Great Britain, Russia, Italy, and France. These European countries continued to compete for overseas empires. However, their sense of rivalry and mistrust, many alliances were created among the great powers. The alliances were intended to help maintain peace, but in reality they became tangled and ultimately pushed the continent into a state of war. The interconnectedness and competition among these nations forced them to become closer in order to combat and seize each other. The determination that resulted from one nation feeling that they needed to be greater than the other forced much advancement in relation to war, which slowly carried on the ongoing chain of globalization. In response to the First World War, there were numerous dynamic economic and political uncertainties that led to post-war instability. This included Albert Einstein's theory of relativity that stated anything could alter within an instant. Suddenly, people became afraid of any change or transformation. Furthermore, Freudian's theory investigated the unconscious mind, exploring the idea that numerous people undertake actions without even realizing it. Literature and philosophy forced people to question the meaning of life and what it truly means to live. These nations were politically and economically unstable, as the people were willing to undertake extreme measures because of desperation and post-war trauma. World War I was a new kind of war. It involved the use of technology for the first time, as well as ushering the notion of war on a grand and global scale. It left behind unforgettable traces of death and destruction that had never been seen before human eyes. Desirable feelings of distress and suffering rapidly traveled throughout the world. In Modern Uncertainty by Bertrand Russell states that the development of the mindsets after the war altered the world to globalize it as it becomes flatter and smaller. With the endless collapse of the dissolving economy and the human suffering that was endured by the nation, faith in a democratic government was long lost. The people now desired a strong political leader that was capable of solving the continuous issues and current state of the people. However, the leader wasn't one who brought the people out in a positive light, but rather one who would establish the German form of fascism. This leader's name is Hitler, the evil dictator who is notoriously known as the initiator of the mass slaughter of millions. German troops began invading territory outside her boundaries. Other nations, such as the French, were unwilling to risk war. Therefore, the British urged appeasement into Hitler in order to keep peace. These acts of appeasement solely strengthened Hitler's power and prestige as a leader. In the time period prior to the Holocaust, I believe that the process of globalization has been hindered for the first time in this era. European nations reverted to their old ways of monarchy and dictatorship, whereas before many countries developed a sense of equality and democracy. For example, while fascists broke out in Italy and other countries like Hungary, Poland, Yugoslavia, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, and so many more suspended all forms of democracy, since citizens of the nation believed that with the severe economic problems, dictatorship was the only way to prevent instability. Thus, the numerous steps of progress that had rapidly advanced to reach the point of equality forced these nations to take a few steps backwards in the direction of hindering globalization. Driven by disagreements, the United States and the Soviet Union alliance began to unravel. The two allies now became enemies as they began to pursue opposing goals. This would lead to nearly a half-century of conflict called the Cold War. According to the Modern World History textbook, the Cold War is a struggle over political differences carried on by short means of military inaction. Though there were extreme differences between the United States and the USSR, the world was still able to globalize due to the new technology and innovations that were founded as a result of the competition. Since this war was carried on by means short of military action, the opposing sides were capable to compete through spying, propaganda, diplomacy, and secret operation dealing with one another. The Cold War further affected the science and education in both countries, which ended up influencing the world at large. For example, in 1959, the Soviets announced the development of the rocket that could travel great distances, an intercontinental ballistic missile. As a result of the Soviets' new innovations, the United States believed that they had fallen behind, so they introduced their own satellite. Though these nations did not see eye to eye, they advanced in an unimaginable way. Thus, these constant astounding discoveries and findings were uncovered, contributing greatly to the process of globalization. As one side began to achieve more, the other side desired to achieve even greater. This serves as a perfect example for the leveling and flattening of the Earth's platform, shrinking the world from a size medium to a size small. With the exception of World War II, each significant event through the 1800s up until 2000 has forced the world to become closer, tighter, and smaller. Starting as early as the Industrial Revolution, change would inevitably pave the pathway for the future. Once the nations had the resources to progress from the Industrial Revolution, they started to gain a sense of deep pride and devotion for their nation, nationalism. However, this slowly led the nations to become thirsty to achieve and seek what is considered superior, imperialism. From the Industrial Revolution derived nationalism, and from nationalism, imperialism evolved. At this point, the domino effect becomes evident as the desire for a powerful army was now put into perspective, a nation's prime objective. From here on out, a future full of fighting existed between World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. From my knowledge, based on this year, I can conclude that almost each event has contributed greatly to the flattening of the world, forcing this world to become an integrated, globe-splitting network where one can simply plug in, play, compete, share knowledge in a way easier than ever before. From this chain reaction of events, progression and advancement spurred, whether it be for the better or the worse. As a result of this, the world went from a medium to a size small, Globalization 2.0 to Globalization 3.0, as inevitable and natural as the forces of gravity.